Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
Charge has been filed against a Berlin man in the hit-and-run death of Gavin Canup. The trial in the shooting death of Wicomico County Sheriff's Corporal Glenn Hilliard gets underway, and May is Lyme Disease Month. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. In our studio is Greg Bassett, editor and general manager for the Salisbury Independent. And on the phone, Susan Canfor, reporter for Coastal Point and a contributor to the Salisbury Independent. Later in the show, Delmarva Public Media's Brian Russo will take a closer look at the Canup trial. But first, I want to take a look at this trial of Austin Davidson, Greg, who has been charged in the death of Corporal Glenn Hilliard. You actually sat in on the trial. What's happening there?
Yeah, I was in the courtroom for a couple days this week. I guess they picked the jury on Monday, and they were opening statements on Tuesday. They got down to the first testimony. Mike Lewis, our county sheriff, testified, and then they played some of the video, the surveillance video from the apartment complex in Pittsville, where the deputy was shot. It was just excruciating to watch that. It was just awful. I was not emotionally prepared for this. And then in the afternoon, they showed the video from the deputy's body cam, where you can see where he has been shot by someone. It was night, but it was amazing how really you could really see what was going on. But anyway, just an awful experience in a courtroom. Nothing like I've experienced in the 40 years that I've been covering courts. Nothing on this level, certainly. And the jury was certainly quite affected by it all. The defendant, notably, was not affected by any of it, which was kind of shocking for me to see, because we were all very rattled by what we saw in the courtroom, and it was just excruciating. So this thing, it's been scheduled for 12 days. We think it'll probably go about 9. I don't think it'll finish this week, and we'll probably have a conclusion next week. But just excruciating testimony here in Wicomico County.
You said that Wicomico County Sheriff Mike Lewis got up on the stand. What was he like on the stand, and what did he contribute to that?
Mike was very stoic. He was emotional at times, but mostly not emotional. Very professional. He talked about Deputy Hilliard and his history with the agency, with the office. Talked about his family. Talked about how the coworkers really liked him, and hit on how dangerous it is. This would, in a deputy's experience, perhaps be a minor thing. He was sent to pick up Mr. Davidson, who was wanted, and those things, 99 times out of 100 go just fine. Officers know that anything like that could happen, but that was certainly not the expectation on a Sunday night in the summer in Pittsville.
Also, in terms of the defense, what were the opening arguments like? What's at issue here? Because it's very clear that there was a shooting.
Yeah, I missed the opening argument from the defense attorney, who I've been told, and I can't remember his name right now, but I've been told he's probably the best public defender in the state of Maryland, and that he is actually retiring. This is going to be his last case. Part of the scuttlebutt in the courthouse was that this might have been eligible for a change of venue, and there are people with a lot of concerns about that. One of the reports from one of the TV people that I saw, this during the jury selection, there was 100 people that were rounded up, from which they got the 12 jurors. The question's always asked, have you seen any publicity on this? And of the 100 people, pretty much everyone stood up. They were all very familiar with this. Some lawyers have told me that would have made a judge normally ask, if the change of venue had been asked for, and I guess it was, extend that change of venue. That did not happen. So there's a little concern on an appeal about a change of venue, but the evidence just sitting there in court is overwhelming. The cross-examination, the questions about, hearsay that were being said by witnesses, but, the defense's case, I had not seen that put on yet, but wow, this video and the testimony so far was really overwhelming.
Was this funny? Is this a case of whether it was premeditated or not? Is that key issue here?
Yeah. Now he's charged with first-degree murder. So there are accounts that he told people that, if anyone comes to arrest me, I'm going to shoot them. One of the more bizarre things was that Mr. Davidson's roommate, he's incarcerated in the state penitentiary in Western Maryland, his roommate or cellmate, one of the people on his floor, was brought in to testify and testified that Mr. Davidson had said he had an altercation with another inmate. He had created a shiv, a knife, out of a filed down toothbrush. And he said something along the lines of, I'll kill you just like I killed that cop. So the prosecution was using that as almost a confession on his part that he had killed the officer, killed the deputy. That was a bizarre sidebar to this whole thing. But we'll see what the defense says.
Susan, I want to turn to you. There's an effort to safeguard the home of the late Governor John Townsend Jr., perhaps turn it into a museum, all as part of, I guess, the formation of the new Selbyville Historical Society. What's happening there, and how far along is that?
Yes, the small but very quickly growing town of Selbyville has formed an historical society. This is the first time that an historical society has been in Selbyville, and their goal is saving the existing Selbyville Library building. Part of that building was the former home of Governor John G. Townsend. Governor Townsend was in office from 1917 until 1921 and was quite an impressive man. He was also a senator and a banker. He was instrumental in making Selbyville the strawberry capital of the country at one time. The new library is being built. A new library is being built behind the existing library. So they're trying to decide what to do with that Townsend home. And there's also a newer section added on to the Townsend home where the children's library is now. But this historical society, the new members of the historical society, want to buy that existing building for $550,000 and make it a museum and a community meeting hall. I talked to Scott Collins. He was a former police chief in Selbyville. He's retired from that position now, and he's on the board of the Historical Society. He told me there are some fundraisers planned to try to raise the money to buy the building, and they're also trying to get some government funding and probably some grants. There are new members of the Historical Society are welcome. He would like to see new people join the Historical Society. The dues are just $10, and they want everybody, of course, to come together and try to save this old building because of the deep history of former Governor Townsend, who interestingly was friends with Teddy Roosevelt and his family. So Mr. Collins and that Historical Society is working hard to try to save that building, Don.
We get a sense, by the way, of what the governor was like?
My understanding, I wasn't born yet, I'm happy to say, but my understanding is that he was a man of many interests. He was interested in banking. He had a cannery. He was a senator. He was a governor. He brought a lot of people down, dignitaries and elected officials down from Washington, D.C. to Selbyville, was very proud of the town, and was quite an interesting man from everything that I can read. And there's a lot of historical information about him in a section of that building now. And when and if they're able to make it into a museum, that will all be on display with much more information and a lot of old pictures showing all of his activities.
Greg, understand, turning to you, we have an agreement that's been reached between the superintendents of Wacomico and Queen Anne's County Public Schools after some racial taunts that surfaced in a basketball game between Parkside High and Kent Island. What do we know about how this came about?
Yeah, this dates back to March. The Wacomico had asked for an independent investigation. Queen Anne's County did not agree to that, so there was never an investigation exactly. But both sides have been meeting about the crowd conduct at that game, which led to a forfeit on the part of Parkside. So that was an issue. And the superintendents have come up with something called a plan of action agreement, in which they're going to forcefully communicate the expectations of attending an athletic event to fans from both schools. Competition will resume. There had been a moratorium on the participation between the two schools, but that will resume here this first week of May. And they're going to really stress sportsmanship and let everyone know that whatever happened before was not appropriate.
Can you tell me a little bit about that particular incident that sparked this idea that Wacomico was not going to be participating, that Parkside was not going to be going to Kent?
Yeah, there had been, at that game, there had been taunts, and then one of the Parkside players sort of reacted at the end of the game to like kind of a buildup of the taunts. There was a physical altercation. The two teams started to engage in, some sort of fighting or sort of a standoff. Parkside coach pulled his team off the floor into the locker room. The Queen Anne's coach followed them into the locker room and was berating these players, according to reports. Part of the problem with that is that the coach for Queen Anne's is a Circuit County judge, our former Congressman Frank Cradaville, and just lots of things back and forth. Queen Anne's officials refused to believe that their fans had been a problem. They said that the fans that were a problem were actually the ones from Parkside who would come up. A lot of finger pointing back and forth, but really an incredibly awkward situation.
Because, as I understand, there's a certain history to this, and this wasn't like really the first instance where that has happened.
Yes, there have been many questions, many problems with the Kent Island High School. You might remember that Kent Island High School was part of the Queen Anne's County High School in wherever that is, not Chestertown, the Centerville, and then they formed the new school like around 1999. It's not a very diverse school. There's a lot of wealthy students that go there, not to stereotype too much, but the racial tolerance has been an issue with that school, not just for Parkside, but for even schools, in Anne Arundel County that come over, Broad Neck, those schools. There have been problems in that gymnasium before.
Finally, because when I looked at the list, they talk about communication, expectations for attendance, zero tolerance, I guess, for racially derogatory comments, norming some kind of sportsmanship behavior. One would have thought that had already been in place.
Sure.
I mean, I don't see any penalties. I don't see any action that could be, say, leveled against any particular individual. I mean, it's more like communication.
Yeah, there's the big communication element. Now, there are the rules about, being expelled from a game that exist normally within every game that have always existed, so they'll be enforced. But it's really just, I think, an awareness issue right now for them.
So, Susan, I want to turn to you, and we got the Special Olympics coming up, and a lot of attention in Delaware about who's going to be carrying the torch.
Yes, the Ocean View Police Department, which is a very highly respected police department in town, is celebrating Corporal Brian Caselli. He's being honored as the Torch Runner of the Year by the Law Enforcement Torch Run for Special Olympics Delaware. This is quite a prestigious honor. On June 9th, during the opening ceremony of the Summer Games at the University of Delaware, Officer Caselli will deliver the Flame of Hope to 2019 Athlete of the Year, Jean Giuliani. I talked to Officer Caselli, a very cheerful and polite 32-year-old officer who has been with the police department 10 years, and he said he was humbled and excited about the opening ceremony. He told me, "I can only imagine how I will feel that day. It is an amazing honor, and I am so grateful for the opportunities I've been given with Special Olympics." Police Chief Kenneth McLaughlin got him involved when Officer Caselli was just getting out of the police academy about 10 years ago. And the chief is so proud. He said Officer Caselli works hard to ensure acceptance and inclusion for all people with intellectual disabilities, and he is very worthy of this honor. And Dawn, interestingly, Chief McLaughlin, who keeps a really low profile and always puts the spotlight on his officers, he himself was honored as Torch Runner of the Year in 2008.
So in terms of this torch running, it's a very big deal then in Delaware.
It's a big deal to be the Torch Runner of the Year and be the one who presents the torch to the Special Olympic, the person in Special Olympics who's honored that year. It's a very prestigious honor for this organization. And Brian Caselli has been an officer for some time, and he told me that when he started, right when he got out of the police academy, Chief McLaughlin said, "I want you to come with me up to the University of Delaware for the Special Games." And he said, "I grew up in New York State. I had no idea what he was even talking about. But once he got involved, he just fell in love with the athletes." And he said the look on their faces when somebody in uniform gives them an award is just so heartwarming. But once he got involved, he's been involved now for 10 years, and he plans to stay involved.
Greg, we've got big news in Delaware, rather Maryland. That is, Senator Ben Cardin will not be seeking re-election. The Maryland Democrat apparently said that it is time to hang up the spurs, as it were. Also understand that there's a lot of talk about, for instance, Representative Jamie Raskin, perhaps, having one of the highest profiles. I understand Representative David Trone has already announced he's going to jump in. I understand he's got a lot of money. What do we make of this, and what do you make of Ben Cardin's long history, not only obviously a senator, but he was in the state legislature for quite some time.
Yeah, Ben Cardin at the time, when he was 35, he was Speaker of the House of Delegates in the state of Maryland. At that time, he was the youngest person to ever serve as House Speaker. He's 79 now. He followed Paul Sarbanes into that U.S. Senate seat in 2007. He was elected to the House of Delegates in 1966. He had Barbara Mikulski's old congressional seat. That congressional seat, which is now held by John Sarbanes, in fact, has been like the breeding ground for whoever served in the U.S. Senate. So Barbara did it. Well, like Paul did it, had that seat. Barbara had that seat and ascended. Ben did. We have not heard whether John Sarbanes might make himself a candidate or not. But Ben was he was just so affable. He was just so kind. As a reporter, he understood, with his experience, he knew what we needed and he knew what to give us. And he was someone that we talked to a lot because in the Senate, he was head of the Small Business Committee in various forms. So the chambers and the Rotaries and those groups, the business groups, really needed him, respected him, relied on him. And he was more than accommodating in helping us understand the federal roles in small business. Just a great senator, great man, never controversial. You could argue as a Democrat, you always knew how he was going to vote. But I think he really served with great distinction.
So what do you make of who possibly might replace him?
There are several people, but one thing that will be interesting in this race, there are several African Americans and African American women who would potentially want to run for seek this office. So the Democratic primary is going to be quite busy. Governor Hogan had taken himself out of possibly running against for the other Senate seat, Chris Van Hollen. I don't know that the former governor, has said what he would have an interest in this seat. He would, look like he was focused on running for president, but maybe he'll run for the Senate seat. The Republican field is a lot smaller.
Do we expect anything out of the Republican field? I mean, do you think the Republican field will be sort of like it was for the governor last time around? I mean, what do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think when you think who can win vatewide as a Republican, maybe some of the far right Republicans have learned that they're not going to win in Maryland, but I don't know if that's going to stop them. We've heard that Andy Harris would like to be a senator at some point. He'd also like to be governor. He's our congressman. Perhaps he would run. Maybe his time in the House is over, but I don't think so. He just got a subcommittee chairmanship, so I'm sure he's enthused about that. Hogan certainly is someone who's won statewide. That's the key. If you can win statewide is the key.
You have to be fairly moderate, I think, as a Republican in order to win in the blue state. I'm thinking of Ehrlich, for instance, who was the previous one, that they don't have this attachment that, say, for instance, the last.
Yeah, and going way back, Jay Glenn Bell and Mac Mathias, both very moderate Republicans.
And finally, I want to turn to you, Susan. Ocean View is holding its spring celebrations this weekend. I understand there'll be some planting of an arbor tree. Coastal towns, historic village is also going to be open. What is all that going to be about?
Yes, historic village will be open. There are several houses there, some old houses, and some of them are furnished. In like the old days, you can go in and walk around and see some of the furnishings and old pictures and books of old pictures. And they will plant a tree in honor of Arbor Day. But spring is in the air in Ocean View, Don, no doubt, and it will be in full bloom at John West Park as the town presents its first spring fling. The word is that Mr. E. Bunny will be making an appearance, and around a pose for pictures with children. There will be music, foods, and beverages will be for sale. The Boy Scout troop will be selling, I think, hot dogs and some beverages. Arts and crafts will be for sale. There's a plan for a giant slide for the children and an opportunity to socialize and enjoy that very well-groomed John West Park that many Ocean View residents consider to be the centerpiece of the town. Spring Fling will be from 1 until 4 p.m. this Saturday, and in case of rain, it's planned for the next day. And the best thing of all about Spring Fling, Dawn, there's no admission charge. You can get in free.
Is this I assume this is a regular thing. What kind of town participation does this have in terms of people really getting into it?
So the town is sponsoring it. It's the first time they've done anything like this. They have a lot of activities during the year. The town presents a free concert series, a free movie series, and probably the biggest and best-known event is called Cops and Goblins. It's a huge Halloween celebration. Everybody gets free pizza, free Rita's Ice. Everybody who comes gets fed, gets lunch free, potato chips and cookies and candy. It's a big trick-or-treat event. It has grown tremendously over the few years that I've worked in Delaware. And now Spring Fling is something they're trying that's new. They're going to try to get it to become as big as Cops and Goblins. This is the first year. It's debuting this Saturday. So we'll see how it goes and how it grows. But I have a feeling there'll be a lot of people there, especially if it's a nice day.
We were speaking with Greg Bassett. He's editor and general manager of the Salisbury Independent. And on the phone, Susan Canfor, reporter for Coastal Point and a contributor to Salisbury Independent. Appreciate you both stopping by and chatting with us.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.